Good morning and welcome to the Parliament channel. We are live on cable channel 11, 105.5 FM and on the internet at www.ttparliament.org. This morning, Tuesday, October 13th, 2015, we are standing by to bring you live coverage of the 6th sitting of the House of Representatives in the first session of the 11th Republican Parliament. Today, debate is expected to be continued on the appropriation for the financial year 2016 Bill 2015. This bill was introduced on the 5th of October 2015, and we have had 3 days of debate so far. The 9th of October, on which the 9 members spoke, the 10th of October, on which the 8 members spoke, and yesterday, the 12th of October, on which the 8 members again spoke, bringing a total of 25 members of the House of Representatives who have spoken thus far on this bill. Once again, this is the Parliament Broadcasting Network on cable channel 11, 105.5 FM, and on the internet at www.ttparliament.org. We are awaiting the arrival of the Speaker of the House of Representatives, so at this time we go over to the chamber.
Honourable Speaker.
Welcome to the 6th sitting of the House of Representatives in the first session of the 11th Republican Parliament, which takes place Tuesday, October 13th, 2015.
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the Creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this House here assembled, for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Oath or affirmation, announcements by the Speaker, public business, government business, bills, second reading.
Honourable members, the debate on the second reading of the following bill, which was in progress when the House adjourned on Monday, October 12, 2015, will be resumed. A bill entitled An Act to Provide for the Service of Trinidad and Tobago for the financial year ending on the 30th day of September 2016. I now call on the Honourable Member for Moruga, Tableland.
Madam Speaker, good morning. To the members of government, good morning. Those on the opposition side, good morning. That good morning comes all the way from Moruga, Tableland. Madam Speaker, by my count, I am the 25th speaker in this budget debate, which means that if you include the finance minister, 26 persons have offered you congratulations. Now, I know if it were me, by now I'd be fed up. But I crave your indulgence on my behalf and those who will come after me, that even though you're talking to a member of our side, you accept my congratulations. I want to extend the same to all MPs here, regardless of side. At the end of the day, we were elected to do our job, and I'm certain we all intend to do it. Madam Speaker, I note that there is some, I don't want to say pressure, but a great deal of expectation on me today. I mean, I am making history for myself and for my family. That's in a small sense. But in a large sense, I am the first person ever in the history of this nation to stand in this House from A, Moruga Tableland, I mean, having been born and residing there, and then more specifically, from the community of Moruga. No major party has ever before selected a candidate from my community after the screening, and no person from my community has ever stood in these hallowed halls before. So I understand in a very concrete sense that even beyond this hall, the expectations of me are great. I'm thinking that maybe for the first time in a long time, the ratings for Parliament Channel and Moruga Tableland will be very high today. Madam Speaker, in doing so, I would like to pay homage to one of the oft-forgotten founding members of the PNM, Mr. DeWilton Rogers. Might be a name lost to posterity. Some people don't know that the PNM actually started in Moruga way back in the 1950s. And Mr. Rogers is one of the architects of the party, along with Dr. Williams. And interestingly, he happened to live just a door or two away from my father. I also want to pay homage to my single remaining parent, my family, and perhaps most significantly, to the 20,000 plus voters of Moruga Tableland who rightly exercised their franchise in the last election, giving the highest voter turnout in the entire nation. Thank you, Member for Laventille West. Madam Speaker, I have listened with intent to both sides of the debate. I am quite familiar with every member of the government side, so nothing they said to me is unknown because the PNM is a party that is planned, we plan things, we organized. So even though I may not know their portfolios in any great detail, I have a good idea of what every member here is going to say. So permit me to say, Madam Speaker, that I have listened with greater intent to what has been said on the other side. And I mean that with no disrespect of any kind. I am intrigued, as I suppose the nation is intrigued or remains intrigued by, to coin a phrase, how one goes about defending the indefensible. It has been very interesting. I suffer from a disease called low expectations. So I can't say I've been disappointed by anything said on the other side. I listened to the member for Paray, the former Prime Minister, high on emotion, low on substance. That's my humble opinion. I listened to Tabaki, great in passion, once again substance missing. I was intrigued by the stridency of Couva North. She's not here now, so I can't extend congratulations to her. I was impressed by all of those on both sides who made their maiden speech. I'm very glad that the member for Kumutu Manzanilla has entered because with your humble leave, I'd like to offer her a little advice. I was fortunate to meet with her for the first time in person 2 weeks ago, where she was very instrumental in helping the lying minister and I.
Best that in referring to any other member, you say the honorable member.
No problem. Thank you, Madam Speaker. Yes, I'll rephrase. I encountered the honorable member for Kumutu Manzanilla for the first time in an official capacity 2 weeks ago when she was very instrumental in assisting the lying minister in education to solve a problem within her constituency. But I would like to caution her that she should understand that the Hansard is a permanent record, meaning that 200 years from now, a young person, a researcher, could be doing some research and encounter something that she says. I myself have found myself in that situation, and one is sometimes, appalled at the kind of things that were said openly in legislative rooms, and that she may not want to be remembered as someone who referred to people within her constituency as indigent. words have both connotative and denotative meaning. And I'm not sure, I'm very sure that's not the word you intend to use. So, if I could be so bold, Madam Speaker, I'd like to advise her to wipe that word from her legislative dictionary. If the Honourable Member for Princeton were here, he is not, I would congratulate him on his stance against bullying, which is a problem within our society. But I would also like to give him some free advice, which is, he needs to understand that that pronunciation of his name, which seems to be such a large issue, is not in any way predicated in the way that he believes, because he mentioned that it's based on the Sanskrit language. But even the most cursory research will establish that that language is a written script used by scholars. No one actually speaks Sanskrit. In addition to that, it has a very different etymology from most of the languages popularly spoken in India. So perhaps that Darat has more to do with finickiness than with linguistics. But I'll leave that there. I stand here, like everyone else here today, Madam Speaker, wearing two hats. I have been fortunate to be elected by the people of Moruga Tableland to represent them. And if I might be so bold, I would say that I have, in that constituency, the greatest supporters in the entire nation. No disrespect meant to any of the other members here. I also stand as a Minister of State in the Ministry of Education. And of course, one wonders, or one is left to ponder, which portfolio one should speak to first. But I remember, as I'm sure every member on this side as well recalls, that famous meeting within which the political leader admonished us that anyone who had not signed up to be a member of Parliament and was instead solely concerned with being a minister should leave now. And I, like everyone else in that room, did not leave. Meaning that at the end of the day, my, I don't want to say premier or more significant, but slightly more significant portfolio is to serve the people who have duly elected me. So I will speak to their concerns first. I remember, Madam Speaker, that there is a line minister here. I am speaking before him due to provenance, and I don't intend to overshadow what he has to say about our ministry. So, Madam Speaker, with your leave, I'll speak to the concerns of my constituency first. I say this with no pride. I say this trying my very best to lend truth to reality, that no insult intended to the member for Toko Sangri. Kuva South, I truly missed you. Sorry, the honourable member for Kuva South, I'm so happy you arrived. I truly missed you. Madam Speaker, as I was saying, I say with no pride that I am standing here as a representative for the most underdeveloped constituency in Trinidad. And I say that noting members here for Laventille West, Laventille East, Toko Sangre Grande. But the circumstances of the Moruga Tableland constituency are unique. Now, on the campaign trail before I got here, I made a solemn promise to the voters who were going to elect me that I would never stand here with duplicity, that I will always speak the truth, I would never shade the truth, and I would hold to those values. And Madam Speaker, I intend to start that history today. So I want to state definitively from the front that it would be historically inaccurate to blame the opposition for the total state of my community. In fact, any historical research would underpin that the problems facing Moruga Tableland predate the creation of the UNC. In fact, historical accuracy must underpin that they even predate the birth of the PNM. If I were to go into a long explanation, I would talk about colonialism and the significance of primate cities and the colonial ethos, which was always centered on metropolitan areas and not the so-called hinterlands. But I'm not here for that today. So I am not here to blame the opposing side, Madam Speaker, for what has happened in Moruga Tableland since independence. But what I can say definitively is that since 2010, what were already tenuous situations got definitely worse. I can say that without qualification. And I can speak to a number of factors with evidence to substantiate that statement. It was interesting to me, Madam Speaker, that one of the very early polls done in my constituency at the beginning of the campaign stated that when it came to local issues in my constituency, the number one burning issue affecting the voters was crime. Now, I found that fantastic. In fact, I laughed, Madam Speaker, one of my most scandalous laughs. Because if you know anything about Moruga Tableland in general, and Moruga in particular, it is, contrary to the words of St. Augustine, a very low crime area. In fact, Madam Speaker, when you say crime traditionally in Moruga, you're talking about arcane situations like stealing a yard fowl, or in earlier times, riding a bicycle without reflectors. Those were considered crimes. But my laughter, Madam Speaker, was proven inaccurate, because within a week or two of that statement, that poll coming out, we suffered an anomalous spate of crime, Madam Speaker, where we had 8 murders in 8 weeks. Something unknown in the history of Moruga. In fact, I recall as a child my mother recounting to me every single murder that she could remember in Moruga. And at the end of the discussion, she had fingers to spare. There were so few. But in the midst of a very hot campaign, we had 8 murders in 8 weeks. Now, if I were trying to score cheap political points, I could say, well, of course, the UNC is, or was, in my opinion, scattered, soft, disorganized on crime. I could point to their infamous refusals to honor the contract with the OPVs. But I take the critique of Princess Town when he said that one should not ascribe a single solution to a very complex problem. But sometimes single solutions are indicative of the way that you deal with complex problems. Because of the way that the previous regime mishandled the crime situation, what was once a very safe community is now riddled with guns because we have an open coastline. For those who don't know, Madam Speaker, Moruga is very close to the Columbus Channel. What you have is a very large open coastline where all forms and manners of contraband can enter. And that has been the case. So the community that would have been very, very pristine and in many ways archaic is now riddled with excess guns, is now a crime bed. And in that spate of 8 murders in 8 weeks, I lost a classmate. I lost a former student, Madam Speaker. So it isn't an abstract idea to me, it is something that affects me and the people I love dearly in a very, very direct way. So I, speaking on behalf of my constituency, took great heart in the fact that the Honorable Minister of Finance has opted to break a long-standing trend to make national security the ministry that has the highest subvention in terms of our budget this year. What would have been meaningless to the people of my constituency because of changing cultural circumstances has become meaningful. And it is my expectation that because of that subvention, the minister will make direct intervention to do something about our open coastline. And I'm confident of that because yesterday when I left Moruga, I saw police and military presence there in such abundance never seen before in the history of my constituency. So whereas the Honourable Member for Kumutu Manzanilla has been touting that, you know, we talk and they act, it's quite clear that the PNM is already acting. I could speak in a general sense about infrastructure, Madam Speaker. But if you understand the history of the Moruga section of my constituency in particular, I have to take out one subset from that discussion and speak about it directly, and that's the road situation. Roads are an example of infrastructure, but in terms of the difficulties in my constituency, it deserves its own discussion. The week before the election, the last MP with the curious hair, I'm sure you all know what I'm talking about, made an ad hoc decision to begin a slapdash fixing of the Moruga Road, so that half of the road is now fixed. Madam Speaker, the fixed half is already falling apart, because whereas the former chairman and the Minister of Rural Development, Mr. Franklin Khan, has been touting that the PNM is going to devote sizable sums on one hand to doing a study of the Moruga Road, and on the other hand to doing a significant upgrade of that road. As a cheap election gimmick, the former regime decided to do a half-done job to use the local parlance, papi show people. It's already crumbling. If you know anything about Moruga, the dominant soil type is something that the locals call sapate. It's a very heavy clay, retains a lot of water. It lends itself tremendously well to this thing called mass wasting, which we call landslips and landslides. And there are various areas in my constituency that are prone to it. Am I saying that the former regime is at fault for that? Of course not. That's a matter of geography, it's a matter of gravity, and a matter of water. But what I can say, Madam Speaker, is that they have not handled it at all well. In fact, they have not handled it at all. So imagine the joy of the people of Moruga, who have been plagued with poor road situations since Kingdom Come, to hear the Minister of Finance say in these hallowed halls that the PNM is going to expend $500 million to upgrade the Moruga Road. I'm sure if my community were prone to doing that sort of thing, they would be dancing in the street. Because roads are infrastructure everywhere else. But when you live in a community that is known for, that is marked by, that is judged by, in many instances, the poor quality of its roads, the roads have a greater psychological meaning. So I want to extend my gratitude to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Finance. On one hand, for doing something that has also never been done, putting the word Moruga in a budget. And then proposing to do something besides a half-done job or talk. Honorable Minister, our gratitude to you. In fact, no, my gratitude to you, because I also live there. I traverse those roads, so my gratitude to you. I passed on the half-fixed road this morning. The other major bugbear that makes life difficult for my constituents is a never-ending water situation. And to recycle a theme, I will say again, I am not blaming the opposing side, Madam Speaker. They are not responsible. I spent my entire life in Moruga, childhood and adulthood, and water has always been a difficult situation. When I would recount to students at UE that I would get up at 2 in the morning to go to a spring, to wait for the spring to gush, to collect water, to them that's a very prosaic story. It's very picturesque, but for me, it was reality. Yes, cold water. Thank you, Honorable Member for the Martin Central. Very cold water. And that was a major part of my childhood. Now, when I look back, it's nostalgic. It's a funny story to tell, but back then, there was no joking matter. So I'm not saying that members of the other side, including the member for Chaguanas West, are directly responsible for what remains a poor water situation in Moruga Tableland. I can't say that. That would be disingenuous. But what I can say is like the simple equation I've been painting so far, which is you take a situation which might be bad, and you add the UNC, and it gets worse, obtains here as well. Prior to 2010, I live in Moruga, Tableland, Honorable Member for Couva North. I live there. Yes, I'm saying that. Yes, I am saying. Madam Speaker, I live in Moruga, Tableland. Prior to 2010, we had a tenuous water supply, but I could count on water coming to my home 3 or 4 times a week. In 2010, there was a desalination plant at Loon, which is in the lower regions of the Moruga area. And I have discussed with voters there, and they recounted to me that they got high-quality water regularly. After 2010, with the incoming of a new regime, that plant was totally gutted within a matter of months.
No. Speak if we mean speak.
That plant was totally gutted within a matter of months, leaving the entire Moruga portion of the constituency with one major water source, which was the Trinity Dam, which was a dam, claimed by WASA from Prt9. Then began water woes of a type I had not seen since I was a young child. Up to this point, in a land, Madam Speaker, in which one touted of water for all, I was fortunate to have water come to my home once a week on Sunday. And I was thinking, Madam Speaker, that was, criminal on the part of WASA. But when I started campaigning and started walking about, I soon came to realize that I was privileged. Privileged because there were other communities within the entire constituency that were lucky to receive water once a month. In fact, when I went to some areas like Pina Road and the Loon area, which the Honourable Member for Laventille West is quite familiar with, when I went to Marak, they informed me that they were lucky to get water once every 3 months. In fact, when I went to Marak in June, they informed me that they had not received water since March, a 3-month gap in the land of water for all. I found it a very curious situation. In fact, there are many areas within the constituency, the village of Prt9, which is at the end of the Penal Rock Road, very close to the constituency of the Honourable Member for Superior, and that Marak, which I just mentioned, that have literally gone back to using pond water in 2015 in the land of water for all. Please do.
Send water, that's all you want.
In the land of water for all. Subsequent to my being elected as a Member of Parliament and discussions with the still remaining chairman of WASA, Madam Speaker, I was allowed to tour the major source of water supply in Moruga, which is the Trinity Dam. And I observed that plant, which had been constructed for use by Prt9 and which may be capably dealt with its needs, had not been changed in any way to deal with water provision for commercial use. So what you have is a large expanse of water, but equipment that is not fit to actually purify the water and move it. Insufficient tank space to store and distribute the water. I, of course, alerted the Line Minister for Public Utilities, the Honourable Member for Dabadi O'Meara, and he has promised me that there will be significant upgrade work done on that plant. He has also promised me to reconsider the recommissioning of the desal plant at Loon, if it is possible. Is it any surprise why the constituents of Moruga Tableland are very pleased with the change in regime, Madam Speaker? Not at all. I could speak to another burning issue, which is public transportation, Madam Speaker. Members of my constituency have been asking me, and I will ask, well, the former minister responsible for public transportation is not a member of this house, but maybe I could ask in general if buses are an endangered animal in Trinidad and Tobago. Because since 2010, they have not been seen in Moruga. Madam Speaker, there has not been a bus, a PTSC bus, in the Moruga half of the constituency of Moruga Tableland since 2010. Apparently they are endangered. We've not seen one. But strangely enough, the old Thomas buses that I would have used as a child when the PNM was in power in the 1980s, that I went to school with, they still come up to Moruga to carry people on excursions. So it is possible that buses can come to Moruga, but apparently not if they are PTSC. But I am certain that with a new regime, with a new budget, that maybe this endangered species will once again populate Moruga, and we will be privy to public transportation. I am very sure of that. I could talk once again in a larger sense about infrastructure. It was my belief, Madam Speaker, that an MP should hit the ground running. So I was adamant that the day after the election I would start working for my constituents. And it was a fortunate and unfortunate circumstance that a crisis arose with a school in my community. And I'll illustrate once again that catalyst for catastrophe that the UNC represents. There is a school that that ended up becoming part of a narrative about me, Madam Speaker, called the Moruga IRC School. It's a very famous school in terms of Moruga. School was constructed in 1876. It was the site, the yard of that school was the site of one of the more significant cultural events in Moruga, that Easter Sunday Bazaar. And if in the 80s or 90s you came to Moruga for a major event, you came to that yard. And that school was an iconic building, a heritage site, so to speak. One day I got a call, in fact the week after I'm elected, I got a call that the school has collapsed. How does a school just collapse? Well, this school has been having structural issues for a number of years. And this is the UNC's prescription. It is, Madam Speaker, do nothing until it reaches a critical mass and a disaster is imminent. Then you come and you do the wrong thing and you create a disaster. So what happens is that EFCL, which I really may not have time to talk about today, because that's a whole separate discussion, hired a contractor to come and fix this school. Now, I reiterate, this school was constructed in 1876. This is before tying steel in buildings was a normal part of construction. The contractor comes, and the villagers tell him, give him advice on what can be done to fix the school. He is, of course, I am a contractor. You don't tell me what to do. I do. So yes, arrogance. He does the most obtuse thing, Madam Speaker. He took the roof off of a building that has walls not tied with steel. And when he did that, like Lego, the four walls collapsed.
Oh my God.
So by the time I got there, instead of a school that was a heritage site, a historical building, a part of the legacy of the people of Moruga, is now a pile of stones. And of course, the children are displaced. What is to be done? And everybody is looking at, of course, at the new MP to do something. Now, in any other community, honorable member for Caroni East, it would have been easy to find a site to the students, Madam Speaker. But in Moruga in particular, and Moruga Tableland in general, and this is the Tableland, this is Barakpur, this is Prt9, this is anywhere in this constituency, there is a lack of infrastructure. So that there was no community center. There was simply no other building to house the students. In fact, I was so desperate, I actually went to speak with the police sergeant to see if they could use the conference room in the station to house the students. Now I know it's absurd. In a police station, Madam Speaker, there are guns, there are criminals. You can't have children in there. But it is indicative of the level of desperation I felt in trying to ensure these students would not be home for a month. Because EFCL told me they would bring a prefab building in a month. And I asked them, is this a month Trinidad time or real time? And they couldn't answer. And I was not willing to allow, Madam Speaker, these children to stay home for a month. So I did the only thing that my team could think of, which was to put them in my office. And it became a matter, a cause célèbre. It became a matter of public acclaim. I was a hero, as though somehow I jumped on a horse and ran into a building to save a damsel.
Duty.
I was not a hero, Madam Speaker. I was making the only choice I could make. Unlike the former MP who allowed the Marak Baptist School to stay closed for an entire term, I was adamant the children would not be left at home. But every media house that reported on this story missed the larger issues, which was one, we lost a very significant historical building, and two, the larger point, there was simply nowhere else to put them. Because we have a constituency in Moruga Tableland that has no state infrastructure. There was no community center. All of the buildings that could have housed them have been condemned and not fit for human use. But yet in this parliament I hear about equity and equitable spending. Apparently Moruga Tableland is annexed to Venezuela. We don't count as part of this nation, Madam Speaker. But I have already begun talks with the line minister responsible for that. And we will get community centers, not only in Moruga. There is one that needs to be built in Robert Village, in Tableland, in Samuel Cooper, in St. Mary's. In fact, it is so bad. I have in my possession a cabinet minute from the last parliament, where there was a decision made to build a youth stadium at St. Mary's Village in Moruga, and nothing was done. Nothing was done by a government that touts equity, equitable spending, equitable treatment.
Social justice.
The facts, Madam Speaker, say otherwise. And on this issue, I could go on and on. I could talk about health care. The fact that if you live in Marak and you break your arm, even though there's a fully equipped health center at Grand Chimay, you can't get a broken arm fixed. You have to go all the way to San Fernando. And contrary to the sanctimonious words of the honorable member for Faizabad, if you do that, you will spend a day waiting and may not get care. Because clearly he's never been, the honorable member has never been to any of the clinics in San Fernando, though he touted yesterday about short waiting times and great care. That exists on paper. It doesn't pertain in reality. And if anyone goes now to the San Fernando emergency at the San Fernando General Hospital and expect to get quick treatment, you might find a Martian there first, Madam Speaker. It doesn't exist in reality. It's a figment of someone's imagination. And these things affect my constituents. In fact, these things affect my friends, Madam Speaker, so they affect me. I've lived this. I'm not touting something here I've read or I've heard. I've lived this in the last 5 years because I am a constituent of Moruga Tableland. All this talk about caring and equity and decent treatment exists on paper, Madam Speaker. It's a figment of the collective imagination of the members of the UNC. Or maybe it pertained in other constituencies and Moruga Tableland was singled out as special and left out. That may well be the case. That's a matter we can perhaps debate as we go on. And I could talk, Madam Speaker, about many more issues concerning my constituency. But I have 5 years. And I'll have a lot of time to bring these issues up again. So I want to shift in the remaining time to talk a bit about my experiences vis-a-vis the budget in the Ministry of Education. Madam Speaker, I wish to do so carefully because I note that I am speaking before the line minister. And I do not wish to undermine or take away from what he has to say. Don't wish to overshadow anything because I'm sure he intends to present an overarching discussion of the problems plaguing / the direction forward in that ministry. So I can, in my remaining time, just give a personal view of what I've encountered since I've been there. Now, it is well known in these spheres, the political spheres, the realm of the politics, that education has traditionally been the ministry given the largest subvention in the typical budgetary year. So this year, with national security at number 1, is a bit of an anomaly. This year's allocation is some 9.4 billion, up 300 million from last year. That's a sizable sum of money, Madam Speaker. So imagine my surprise. Imagine my chagrin. Imagine my embarrassment. Imagine the minister's embarrassment. When on my first day as minister in state in that ministry, walk in the doors and I am informed that this ministry is full of rats, Madam Speaker. And I tend to be very facetious. So I was thinking in my brain, are these rats of the 2-legged or 4-legged variety? But I didn't say that. Didn't say that. I thought that. To be informed that a ministry that in the last year had a subvention of $9.1 billion is full of rats. Is rat infested. And we had a minister who perhaps had no problem existing in that environment. Imagine my joy when the minister subsequently informed me, Madam Speaker, that I would be decanted to the towers. I have to say I am very happy to be here. I have no intention of getting leptospirosis during my tenure in government. Madam Speaker, I am saying this not to be jovial or facetious, but to provide a metaphor for the conditions that exist in that ministry. $9.4 billion balanced against rats speaks to chaos, Madam Speaker, speaks to lack of leadership, Madam Speaker, speaks to poor organization. And in a nutshell, if you go to that ministry, you will see organized chaos.
What?
Organized chaos. Madam Speaker. Even cursory research into that ministry, all you will see coming at you is organized chaos. And I was very pleased that the honorable member for Princestown used an anecdote famous in my community, that a fish rots from the head. So I wonder where that fish was rotting from. I really wonder. Because I don't have time to talk today. But I could talk about one division, Madam Speaker, one extraordinary company in that ministry that is the bane of this nation's existence at this moment. The infamous Education Facilities Company Limited, EFCL, an acronym that should go down in infamy. And I'll, in the remaining time, just give you one anecdote to once again symbolically explain the organized chaos within that ministry. Last week, Honorable Member for Arima and I had a meeting with some irate parents from Rosilac. They've come because they, like many other schools, have been decanted to a community center, Madam Speaker, which is not fit to accommodate students and staff. And they came because they've been waiting for a school building to be finished for 2 years. So the project manager graces us at that meeting to explain these odd circumstances, Madam Speaker. So you have a school in a center, and you have a school being constructed for 2 years. And to me, I have some kind of dissonance with the situation. So I asked the question, Madam Speaker, I've been asking every time I meet EFCL officials. I won't mention that question here because I'm sure the Honourable Member for Arima will deal with that, so I'll leave that out. But I asked the project manager some pertinent questions, which is, why are you managing a project for a school that is taking 2 years? And he couldn't answer. So my irritation began to build, Madam Speaker. And then I get facetious and I say things I probably should not say. So I said to him, well, you know what? In 2 years, I'm sure I could take the children from that school, I could buy sufficient Lego, and they could build a school that size and they'll finish. So explain to me why that project is not finished. And he couldn't answer. The parents were so kind as to furnish the minister and I, Madam Speaker, with with a photo of the school. Now, we are aware of the specs for the Roselac Hindu School. And the specs say that this is to be a 2-story construction to house approximately 153 students. The photo that they bring of the building in construction has 3 floors. So I asked the project manager for EFCL for this project, why does this building have 3 floors? Was the 3rd floor approved? And he said, no, it's supposed to have 2 floors. So I asked him, what does the term, Madam Speaker, project manager mean? Does it mean that you manage a project? He said, yes. Does that mean you're in charge of a project? He said, yes. How then, Madam Speaker, do you explain what ought to be a 2-story school having a 3rd floor? So I asked him once again facetiously, is it that our schools have become self-replicating? The 1st floor and the 2nd floor have a child, which is the 3rd floor? He couldn't answer. But we have a conundrum, which is specs which say 2-story school, actual 3-story building, money run out, cannot finish. And he can't answer. He can't answer, and he's the project manager.
UNC style.
He's the project manager. Maybe that term has changed. Maybe project manager means something else, in the same way that contractor now means something else. He couldn't answer. He still can't answer. In fact, EFCL is like those monkeys on your phone. They can't answer anything. But I'll leave that alone. I don't want to steal from the thunder of the line minister, the honourable member for Arima, because he will have a lot to say about EFCL. So, Clover South, it meant that you manage a project. It means that at least you can answer a question.
Don't be distracted. Don't be distracted.
Ignoring Clover South, Honourable Speaker, my apologies. So maybe I should start winding up. You don't need 10 extra minutes of me, Madam Speaker. Let me say thank you for allowing me to make my maiden speech. And let me give this House an affirmation. I was elected by the people of Moruga Tableland.
45 minutes have expired. You are entitled to 10 additional minutes, within which I expect you to wind up.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am actually winding up. I was elected by 10,800 voters in Moruga Tableland. A number hitherto unseen for the PNM. But they did so with certain expectations. That I would come here and I would advocate for them. I would come here and present their issues. I would come here and fight for their development, for their betterment. That I would come here and set a proper example for the young people of Moruga. That I would not engage in the kind of distasteful behavior that has sometimes been emblematic of this hallowed house. And I intend to do all of that. I intend to be a stringent advocate for my constituency in specific, but for all of this nation in general. I have a personal credo, Madam Speaker, and that I don't tolerate nonsense. I'm happy to be here, and I assure this House, for the next 5 years, you'll be hearing a lot of me. Thank you.
Honourable Member for Mayaro.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to make my maiden contribution in this distinguished chamber. Congratulations to you on your selection to the chair. I must commend your fairness and your impartiality that you have displayed in this chamber. Madam Speaker, as we are always in the presence of the divine, it is important that we never forget that we did not arrive here by chance. We must thank Almighty God for providing the inspiration, faith, and guidance to offer ourselves a service to the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Let me sincerely thank the thousands of constituents who voted on September 7th, 2015, and through the democratic process gave me a mandate to represent their interests and aspirations for the next 5 years in the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago. Let me also thank my wife, my family, my relatives, my associates for embracing me and for giving me the impetus and warm support in my quest towards serving the people of the constituency of Mayaro. Madam Speaker, let me also express my gratitude to my dear political leader, the Honorable Kamala Prasad-Bisesa, for reposing that utmost confidence in me, becoming a part of the United National Congress team in this 11th Parliament of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I take with sincerity of purpose my oath to serve in this Parliament, and I look forward to your guidance, direction, and experience to bear upon the resourceful, analytical, patriotic presentations of which I will seek to undertake in the various debates, motions, and in the general work of this House during my tenure in this most scrutinized chamber. To the member for Moruga Tableland, congratulations on your maiden speech. I too live in a constituency that I represent, and I share every concern that you have, because the issues are similar. I trust that the attention that Moruga will be given, it will be shared to the people of the constituency of Mayaro. Madam Speaker, I spent the last few days sitting in this chamber, listening attentively to all contributions made by the members and honorable ministers in this House. As a first-time member of this Parliament, I am indeed excited to be part of the most important team in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, permit me to quote my 13-year-old daughter when my family came to pick me up on Saturday evening, and I quote, "Daddy, are you for real? I heard nothing, I learned nothing, and I am disappointed. Aren't you all wasting time?" This is my 13-year-old daughter telling me that. Madam Speaker, I was tempted to agree with her, but I soon realized that I may be digging a hole for myself and putting our noble profession in the doghouse. But this conversation with her is not unique. There is a raging battle on social media regarding the conduct of parliamentarians within the national community. Honorable Minister of Communications, I tell you today, there will be no other media than social media in the near future. Social media is turning out to be a game changer. It is the new battlefield. Be wary, be cautious. Madam Speaker, at each arrival in this building, I feel an overwhelming sense of pride as I walk from the car park to this building. When I enter, I am greeted by police officers, many of whom offer a polite salute. These men and women gave me the highest form of respect, Madam Speaker. Then as I come to this chamber, I am overwhelmed by the quality of the parliamentary staff. Yes. They are absolute professionals. Madam Speaker, I then ask, why am I being offered this level of respect and attention by these very same men and women in this building? Is it because I walked my constituency, made promises and won an election? Madam Speaker, is that sufficient to warrant the level of service and respect that I am given? I don't think so, Madam Speaker. But I can offer a theory. The men and women in this parliament allow us into this building each day because they see us as the authors of their future. They see people whom they have elected to legislate a future for themselves and their children. We have locked their proverbial necks for the next 5 years. They have no other choice than to offer themselves and their service. But they ask for only one thing, Madam Speaker, that we must come to this chamber and chart a way forward for our nation to grow and prosper. Madam Speaker, I have yet to experience that pride of sitting in the highest court of our land, sadly. The attitude and behavior of our parliamentarians are leaving a bitter taste in the mouths of our citizens across the board, on both sides. Madam Speaker, I do not think we are earning the respect of the people in this building, much less Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, I want to earn that respect, not demand it from them, neither have it offered to me free of charge. On Saturday, Madam Speaker, we were so busy pounding away at each other that we forgot, or perhaps we didn't care, that there were children in the audience. I'm afraid to venture even a thought of what was going through their minds during that presentation. Madam Speaker, if you'd allow me to talk on an issue that has made national headlines. We in charge now. My question, Madam Speaker, is in charge of what? It cannot be this house, Madam Speaker, because I know you're in charge of this house. It cannot be my house, because my wife is in charge of my house. And I'm sure it cannot be me, because the Lord is in charge of my life. But Madam Speaker, I wish to share with the Honourable Member for Tobago West through you what Tobago West is in charge of. Tobago West, you're in charge of a tourism sector that has been handicapped by a weak and dysfunctional national tourism plan. Tobago West, you are in charge of a sector that is disjointed and disconnected from horizontal and vertical industries. Tobago West, you are in charge of technocrats who have never seen community tourism as a diversification strategy. Our national plan has always circled around accommodation and airlift for the past 20 years. The world tourism market has moved towards the experience economy. Adventure tourism is where the global industry has gone, Madam Speaker. The Honourable Minister of Finance is still talking airlift and accommodation in 2016. Tobago West, you are in charge of a failed ideology. And that didn't start in 2010, mind you. That is what you are in charge of. So please, you deal with that. Okay? Thank you. Madam Speaker, conversely, I wish to remind members opposite that we, on this side, I like to remind them what we are in charge of. We are in charge of ensuring that the government remains accountable to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We are in charge of examining every detail of government expenditure and reporting to the people of Trinidad and Tobago. We are in charge of bringing legitimate expectations of our constituents to this Parliament. We are in charge of reminding honourable members of the government that every action or lack thereof will be monitored and scrutinized over the term of their administration. You see, Madam Speaker, we know, the people of Trinidad and Tobago know the PNM. In 2007, the People's National Movement had one of the largest majorities in Parliament. And within 3 years, they crumbled under the weight of corruption, nepotism, cronyism. It sounds very familiar, very, very familiar. But permit me to actually start the budget debate, since I haven't heard any debating so far over the last 3 days. And to be able to do that, I want to predicate my position on an opinion given in the Trinidad and Tobago Express on Monday, 12th of October, by Mr. Michael Harris, and I quote, "I am afraid I cannot join the chorus of commentators who have been singing the praises of the budget presented last Monday by the Finance Minister. As far as I am concerned, far from being a good budget or a just and courageous budget, what the Minister presented last Monday was a smorgasbord of contradictory measures, lacking in coherence and vision, and serving only to make it more certain that ours shall be a painful reckoning." And I just want to repeat that last 2 words, Madam Speaker. A painful reckoning. He goes on, how are we going to reconcile and bring into balance a $63 billion budget of expenditure versus $41 billion of revenue? The question comes up as to, well, what is the strategy? There must be a strategy when you have such a large, wide margin in terms of your deficit. This is the strategy as explained by Mr. Michael Harris in that same article. And I quote, "This is what the Finance Minister has to say about that. Over the next 6 months, we plan to hold a series of consultations with all the main stakeholders and with the country at large on the state of the economy and on the financial challenges and opportunities we face as a country." Yep, that is it. That is the strategy. That cannot be a strategy, Madam Speaker. So as I predicated my understanding of the budget, and I agree with Mr. Michael Harris here, I wish to focus some aspects of the Minister of Finance presentation as it relates to the agriculture, food security, food production, and its interconnectivity with tourism and information and communications technology. Madam Speaker, it is imperative that our national policies are predicated, adherent, and in sync with the United Nations Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals 2015-2030, or else we run the risk of swimming against the tide and reinventing the wheel every time there is a change in government. Madam Speaker, to go straight into the budget statement, under the heading Agriculture, page 24, and I quote, "We must reverse the decline in agricultural production and create a strong, modern, prosperous, and competitive agricultural sector," end quote. Madam Speaker, how do we achieve these measures? Is it by drastically reducing the allocation in this sector from $1.3 billion to $831 million, with a developmental budget of only $156 million? How can you commit less than 20% of the budgetary allocation to development? How can a $500 million reduction in the allocation signal any government's intention of creating a strong, modern, prosperous, and competitive agricultural sector, Madam Speaker? This administration policy states an intention for growth, but their action speaks to suppression and stagnation. Talking agriculture will not move the sector forward, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Finance went on to state in his presentation, "We will do so by enhancing public sector investment and encouraging private investment in agriculture in particular, agrotechnology and the creation and modernization of agribusiness infrastructure. Well, Madam Speaker, while the appropriation bill can be a policy document for any administration, its deliverables must speak to a strategic policy which ultimately dictates the outcome. I have looked through the allocations for development in the industry, and I would like to bring to your attention some glaring inconsistencies. Under the developmental program, there is no specific item or projects for private sector investments. Where are the incentives to attract and encourage more corporate entities into areas such as greenhouse farming? In my own constituency of Mayaro, Repsol has been leading community groups towards greenhouse farming projects, which have been very, very successful, Madam Speaker, in small scales. Isn't it about time that the state takes affirmative action to create larger scale opportunities in greenhouse farming? Madam Speaker, another issue that is affecting my constituency, and it would have made a lot of headlines a couple months ago, is the sargassum seaweed. We're talking about developmental projects here, and the sargassum seaweed phenomena is expected to be a most frequent visitor to our shores as we grapple with global warming. It's going to be a visitor every year. This has a detrimental impact to the livelihood of our fishermen. There's a gentleman who lives in Ottawa, his name is Clive Mentor, he's a good friend of mine. He calls me every day, Mr. Paray, what are we going to do about this sargassum, boy? It hampering we can't go and fish, the nets are getting damaged. And all we're doing so far, and I guess is what we can do, is clean up the beaches, make sure the pathways and so on are clean. But that is not the solution. Why has not this administration looked at opportunities in funding public-private sector investments in fishing communities like Mayaro to invest in new technologies in inland fishing, inland salt and freshwater fishing? The very same fisher folks who are being hampered by the sargassum seaweed can be trained in operating these new farms, working in these new farms. Madam Speaker, India and Australia is leading the way in developing these technologies associated in the sector. One would then ask, as I've been asked by other people in the fishing industry, well, if we put inland farms and so on, what happens to our boats? What happens to our nets? It's a lot of capital infrastructure. And that solution is simple, Madam Speaker. We live in an experience economy. As I've mentioned about our tourism sector, in Mayaro, if we can't fish, we can sell the experience of fishing, Madam Speaker. There are people who come to Mayaro, and I know there's one young man who has a little boat. He doesn't do too much of fishing, but he charges $1,200 or $1,500 to take 3 people out and spend the day fishing, just for the experience. They may not catch anything, but they love the experience. So this is how we must interconnect some of our solution to drive this country forward, but I'm not seeing that in the developmental projects, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, there is no clear indication of items for agricultural, of investment, in agrotechnology. In all modern agricultural economies, the use of ICT is critical, and I was able to view last night on the Parliament channel, because I missed the end of your presentation, Honourable Minister of Public Administration, where you spoke about the use of ICT in agriculture. So I'm heartened to know that you will be giving it some consideration. If you would allow me, Madam Speaker, to draw a simple example. For 66 years, Israel has been in the forefront of originating and utilizing new forms of farming. Such innovations make creative use of developments like satellite imagery, information technology, and geospatial tools, allowing large and small-scale farmers to better track harvest, manage resources to promote long-term sustainability. Then, if that is so, where is our developmental budget for Centeno and our other research development organizations in Trinidad and Tobago? So if we are serious about diversification and making agriculture a more prominent feature in our strategy, why are we not investing? Why not investing in our research organizations, giving them money to find new ways and new methods to push agriculture forward in Trinidad and Tobago, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, under the developmental budget again, because I need to look at the developmental budget, because recurrent is to pay salaries and staff and building and current and so on. So I will be focusing on that developmental budget, Madam Speaker. There's an allocation under a heading called Agribusiness Industry and Other Enterprises. I don't know what that means, but I'm just looking at the dollar value. It's $1 million. Now, if I'm to suppose that means a developmental budget for agribusiness industry and enterprises meaning business, then $1 million sounds pretty weak, pretty shallow, and I do not know what you can use $1 million for in that broad area, which is an important area. It seems like mere pittance, Madam Speaker, if we want to seriously drive the agricultural sector in this country. There's another item that has raised some queries for me, and it's under a heading called Rice Development Program. $1 million again. Every single citizen in this country eating rice. We are importing large amounts of rice from Guyana, but yet, in a time like this, when we have to move away from the energy business in terms of our primary source of income, we are investing $1 million. $1 million for rice farming. The rice farmers in Sakiu, Trace, Navet, and Ecclesville would really like to know what part of that development is earmarked for them and why. Why are they interested, Madam Speaker? Sakiu, Trace, and Navet produced over 50 acres of rice at a super yield of over 4,000 pounds per acre. That is more than any other location in any of the other rice areas in Trinidad and Tobago. I think they are deserving of a lot of these development and fun. But again, I'm just looking at the drive as stated in the budget statement to what it is under the developmental budget. So I leave that up to the viewers and the listeners of this channel and the people of Trinidad and Tobago to make that decision. Madam Speaker, it is worth noting that it was the partnership government who made a concerted attempt to revitalize the local rice industry. And it was the partnership government that enabled the environment to secure local rice production targets of 50% of total rice consumption by 2018. The partnership government also resuscitated over 580 acres for rice cultivation under the government's commercial large farm program. The partnership government also facilitated the importation of commercial certified seeds from Guyana to ensure sustained and quality production. Madam Speaker, I would also like to discuss another line item I saw in the developmental program, which I was very happy to see. It's called the Agricultural Youth Apprenticeship Program. $3 million was allocated in order to set up a training workshop assessment center for the agricultural labor, micro and small agribusiness development. I applaud this initiative, providing there is a genuine trust in that direction. Madam Speaker, it is imperative that the youth constituency be integrated in all aspects of policy planning and implementation so that the real transformation of agriculture can take shape in terms of rebranding, market appeal, and for greater incentives for young farmers and the agribusiness entrepreneurs to the use of ICT. Madam Speaker, for these measures to become fully attractive to the youth population, we must embark upon a consolidated and concerted program of careers in agriculture, from the primary schools and into the communities, with a blitz on social media. This proposed measure I just spoke of, Madam Speaker, goes much further than what the Minister of Finance touted in his reintroduction of the awards of Best Kitchen Garden in schools. These are just a few examples of where the developmental strategy is in conflict with the opening remarks of the Honourable Minister of Finance, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the intention of the minister to remove and exempt duties on imports into the agricultural sector sounds noble. However, all I ask is that strong monitoring systems be enforced to ensure that the savings is in fact passed on by the suppliers to the farmers and fisher folks, so that they can also pass on the savings to the consumers, who should be the ultimate beneficiary. Alternatively, Madam Speaker, I am sure the farmers may have readily accepted a cash subsidy rebate on all feeds and chemical products during the non-harvesting season as an option, whilst the farmers wait on their harvest to grow so that they can produce to feed this nation. A subsidy cash rebate on feed and chemicals and so on may have been able to put food on their tables for their families. So it's just some food for thought, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the Appropriation Bill 2015-2016 fails to address one of the main components of a robust and energized agricultural sector, that is labor. There is a paradox existing in our society today, Madam Speaker. Each day on social media, I read of people being laid off at several regional corporations, layoffs in the URP program, and CPEP teams being terminated. But this is where the paradox lies, Madam Speaker. And I will draw this example if you would permit me. The review of the economy 2015 has stated that pineapple production has decreased dramatically over the last fiscal year from 887,000 kilograms to 458,000 kilograms. This was mainly due as a result of less acreage and under-cultivation due to a labor shortage. So on one hand, due to economic constraints, our safety network programs have to be culled, it has to be cut. But yet, we cannot seem to find a way to move our surplus human capital to more productive opportunities. Perhaps in agriculture may be a good place to start. Now, I do hope that the components of CPEP and URP that has moved under the Ministry of Agriculture will be put to productive use in assisting farmers in meeting their labor obligations, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, allow me to share with you also an example where the policy directive for downstream industries for the pineapple farmers, where is it? Where is the investment for research into the potential of fiber extraction from the skin of pineapple for the manufacture of clothing? This diversification trust is being pursued in Southeast Asia as we speak. As a matter of fact, Madam Speaker, you can purchase these high-quality clothing on Amazon.com, but I know we are having a bit of challenges with online shopping, so I tread carefully in asking people to go and shop more. But as a bit of a suggestion to the Minister of Finance, I read what Argentina has been doing in order to slow down the appetite for online shopping, thus controlling a bit of the foreign currency consumption. Now, I'm not saying to do this, it's just a bit of idea. He can research it. The Honorable Minister of Finance can research it. But in Argentina, rather than fight a battle with tariff and trade agreements, they put a little tax on the shippers, people who are bringing the goods to your door. And in good format with the policy of this administration to raise revenue, that $22 billion shortfall, tax, may just be well in line to our strategy. So, Madam Speaker, that is an area where I feel that we are very, very weak in terms of the budget, in terms of the budget statement and the direction, in terms of diversification, downstream policies. It is not making sense. It is not connecting to the preamble of the budget statement. Madam Speaker, besides the pineapple farmers in the Moruga, Tableland area, the same approach applies to the watermelon farmers in Kernaham and Cascadoo and Manzanilla, who suffer from the same labor shortages and heavy losses in their wholesale and retail markets. How are we addressing that? Our budget statement, our developmental initiatives based on the nice, pretty yellow books that were given to me, nothing is speaking to that, Madam Speaker. There are many byproducts and the potential for agro-processing spin-offs from the watermelon, which we can pursue in terms of investing in developmental strategies. And I'll give you an example again, Madam Speaker. There are often melon crop failures where hundreds of thousands of pounds are destroyed. However, with the proper investment in research and development, 3 agro-waste products, namely watermelon rind, watermelon skin, and the extracts from watermelon seed, were all investigated for their corrosion inhibition properties for mild steel. These extracts inhibited the acid-induced corrosion of mild steel. What that means, Madam Speaker, this is a downstream industry that is waiting to be researched and found to find solutions in the maintenance and reliability industry. Now, Madam Speaker, I found these things with a simple glance through Google, through the internet, to find solutions. Why aren't we speaking? Why aren't our budget? Why aren't our financial strategy over the next 5 years, and which I assume should have been factored into the budget statement? Why aren't we speaking to those things, Madam Speaker? Madam Speaker, the Finance Minister gives the impression that this administration is going to lead the transformation in agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago. But I think he's 5 years, I think the Honorable Minister, is 5 years too late. Much has already been done in the agricultural sector, and I trust that this administration will continue with greater urgency under the current economic climate. Madam Speaker, if you would allow me just to revisit a bit of what the People's Partnership Administration accomplished over the last 5 years in terms of agriculture in Trinidad and Tobago. There was a revised and comprehensive agricultural incentive program with a multitude of standard and acceptable benefits for the farming community to ensure increased production and conservation of the environment. Madam Speaker, the farming and fisherfolk communities of my constituency welcomed these incentives in fiscal 2013-2014 alone, saw the processing and approval of over 3,500 applications at a cost of over $19 million. We expanded assistance and compensation in a timely manner to farmers and fisherfolks after floods and natural disasters. We approved construction of packing houses to provide processing facilities which ensured that markets were sustained due to sharp increases in commodity prices. We offered more technical support and marketing advice through NAMDEFCO, Madam Speaker. We built and refurbished a number of fish landing facilities and plants to fisherfolk communities which were neglected for decades. While on this matter, it is my hope that whatever the design flaws and challenges that exist in the Guayagüeyari fish landing facility be sorted out in the fastest possible time. Madam Speaker, we stabilized the food inflation rate. When we came into office in 2010, the food inflation rate was 29%. And as we demitted office, this was reduced to single-digit figures of at least 8%. Madam Speaker, from 2010 to mid-2014 alone, the Agricultural Development Bank processed and approved at least 400 grants at an estimated value of $100 million for agro-processing, ornamental fishery, food crops, forestry and livestock, etc. Madam Speaker, another critical element for our National Food Action Plan 2012-2015 was the implementation of a national perennial larceny squad to once and for all address the scourge of perennial larceny, which has plagued the agricultural sector for generations and which has impacted negatively on production levels. The perennial larceny squad, Madam Speaker, has provided extensive coverage across 4 divisional offices in Central, South, East and Northern districts, operating on a 24-hour basis with a manpower strength of over 100 officers. Through ADB Secure at the Agricultural Development Bank, loans were also guaranteed to farmers to cushion the impacts against perennial larceny. We also upgraded several agricultural district offices over the period. Madam Speaker, this brings me to the point that whilst the government has now seen the merits of decentralization in moving the Ministry of Agriculture to central Trinidad, this move by itself will not in any way stimulate the agricultural sector. The ministry's head office, as you would know, Madam Speaker, is responsible for policy and administration. So it is the district offices across the country which must continue to make the difference in improving customer care, technical support, and other logistical support for the agricultural stakeholders. However, Madam Speaker, I believe that the relocation of the ministry has more to do with political mobilization than decentralization. Madam Speaker, we cannot talk decentralization without a serious look at ICT. And again, having listened to the Honorable Minister of Public Administration last night, I am very heartened to see that in his statement, he spent some time speaking to ICT in the agricultural sector. So I trust that with his fervor and drive, that he will be able to deliver that area of the agricultural improvement. The proposed broadband deployment must go beyond social media access for our mobile citizens and school children. Our agricultural districts, our agricultural demonstration farms, and our breeding units must be interconnected to bring government services closer to the people, Madam Speaker. The development of rural communities should be looked at not just from the point of view of improved infrastructure, but with a broader goal of decentralization of services and the attraction of light manufacturing industries. The government should consider again special incentives where these involve job creation. The incentive should relate to the number of jobs created. These are just some of my suggestions, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, the People's Partnership Administration had begun to review the role of the livestock sector in reducing the food import bill. We started the refurbishment and reconstruction of livestock breeding units throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, in Guayari, we reconstructed such a unit after more than 20 years of the facility being abandoned and neglected. Today, this new facility is fully operational, and it's having a sustained impact upon the revival and revitalization of livestock rearing in the community. The revival and sustenance of the livestock sector is also very crucial in the reduction of our towering food import bill as it relates to meat and dairy consumption. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Finance also spoke about security of land tenure, and it is now being accorded a high priority. And such lands will also now be delivered with access roads, drainage and irrigation systems. I would just like to repeat that, Madam Speaker. Security of land tenure is now becoming a high priority for this administration. That is because the historical record, Madam Speaker, will tell you that it is a tragic record with regards to the processing of agricultural leases for farmers. And this didn't start in 2010, Madam Speaker. We inherited an outdated system which had become very indifferent, insensitive, and unrealistic as it relates to leases. There is a backlog of applications, Madam Speaker, which spans generations of farmers. And just as the generations of farmers have spanned, so too the technical officers. So my grandfather would have spoken to the technical officer grandfather, my father talked to his father, and then I am talking to the new. So it's a generational issue in terms of these leases, Madam Speaker. My government began the thrust to overhaul the systems, but red tape and bureaucracy has slowed us down. I therefore ask the Minister to look at ways of speeding up that process, especially now as we want to drive the diversification and our agricultural sector forward. So again, in true style as a government in waiting, Madam Speaker, I would like to suggest to the Honourable Minister of Agriculture that in order to expedite the processing of land tenure for farmers who are in the ministry's database, but they do not have the security of land tenure, they can be offered a 5-year lease so at least they can use that temporary lease for commercial banking and ADB purposes, so they can get financing for their equipment and their seedlings and their properties and so on. However, the farmers can now be given an opportunity to fast-track the process by surveying the land themselves. Let them pay for it. Let them pay the fees for the surveying. So in that way, it would release the ministry from that additional burden and at the same time speed up the processes. Madam Speaker, this was told to me by a rice farmer in Saki Trace Navet. This man may not have had secondary education, but he has a lot of common sense. And I promise that as I stand in this parliament today, I will offer the suggestion to the Honourable Minister, and I hope that he takes it into consideration. Madam Speaker, security of tenure is fundamental to farmers in securing finance, credit, and capital, and towards ensuring that there is a stable environment for valued production levels. Madam Speaker, at the end of all these measures, incentives and developmental programs, the big question still remains: what are the targets for reducing our overwhelming food and import bill, which staggers at over $4 billion? How will the exemption of duties and taxes on imports impact upon food inflation and food security, increase in yields and quality production? What are the long-term investments needed to realize significant levels of agricultural diversification? What are the timelines set to achieve these measures? Madam Speaker, these are the critical questions that have not been answered. They have not been answered in terms of the budget presentation, and these questions are critical in terms of how we move forward as a country in handling our agricultural diversification trust and being able to feed ourselves, because we are not disconnected from global issues. We're not disconnected from what's happening in China, in Asia, in terms of wheat and various type of challenges they are having in their agricultural sector, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I wish to hereby implore the Honourable Minister of Agriculture to continue the aggressive processing of agricultural leases started under the People's Partnership Government. There are several flagship projects within the Mayaro constituency that I wish to highlight at this time, Madam Speaker. The Rio Claro Mayaro blocks, which have over 150 farmers, will issue their leases after decades of waiting. There are many more blocks that has to be processed. I trust that the Minister would look at these blocks and assist our farmers to get their leases in a very, very short time. We would like to see, in terms of my constituency, Madam Speaker, a continuation of upgrades and rehabilitation of agricultural access roads, bridges, and the drainage program, which has been in good swing over the last 3 or 4 years. Areas such as Guppy Hill, Sakiu Trace, Mahabal Singh, Legion Road, Casabon Trace are all ready and waiting for upgrades. And Madam Speaker, these are all areas where we have farmers. They have acres of their crops and they are having challenges to get some of these access roads. The process was started and we would like to see some continuance in the constituency. The people of the constituency of Mayaro, Madam Speaker, would also like to see a completion and a finalization and bring into operation the Guayagwari Fish Landing Facility in the shortest possible time. We would also like to see the restart of full operations of the Ottawa Heritage Market, which was abandoned after more than 15 years and which the partnership government refurbished in 2012. We would also like to see a realignment and expansion of the Mayaro and Rio Claro market, which are grossly underserved, undersized, and we'd hope that some attention can be paid to these two areas. Additional docking and mooring facilities for our fishermen in the Ottawa catchment areas. The development of a Mayaro Rio Claro wholesale market for our farmers. The re-establishment of a branch of the Agricultural Development Bank in Rio Claro to service the needs of our fishermen and farmers from Guayagwari to Beach to Pool Valley. The establishment of a poultry farmers cooperative where our pluck shop owners can engage the state in a public-private partnership to establish large poultry farms and then resell to pluck shops throughout the constituency. Madam Speaker, I also look towards for a report from the Coastal Erosion Unit of the Ministry of Works on finding out a way forward, how far the assessment has reached in terms of dealing with the coastal erosional problem that stretches from Guayaguayari to Manzanilla. I also look forward to the complete outfitting of the Mayaro fire station as early as possible. We have had 2 fires in the last week where homes were destroyed, and there is still no fire stations at that fire appliance at that station, Madam Speaker. There does not appear to be any provision, Madam Speaker.
I'm on my legs, please. Honorable Member from Mayaro, your 45 minutes have been spent. You're entitled to 10 minutes, within which I expect you to wrap up. But before I call upon you, I would just like to ask honorable members, in your effort to comply with Standing Order 53(1)J, which relates to your electronic devices, you may wish to consider not having them in such close proximity to your speakers. We are getting some feedback.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I know the noise came from across the other side when I mentioned about the fire station, but this is what I spoke about early on in terms of our conduct. Because the important issue here that is important to the constituents, Madam Speaker, is that there are no fire trucks in the fire station and 2 houses were burnt. That is the serious matter that I am here to deal with, not the nonsense. I must also say, Madam Speaker, in examining the expenditure reports, there is no appropriation for those appliances. So I would like to ask the Honorable Minister of National Security during his delivery if he can speak to that, if so be. It will be a tragedy if nothing happens in terms of outfitting that station before the year is over. There's a lot of idle grounds in rural communities that can be looked at in terms of increasing housing. There is a serious housing issue in our constituency. I know the demand outstrips the supply, Madam Speaker. I would hope that the new Minister of Rural Development looks at those things and be able to provide some more housings in the constituency. Madam Speaker, to wind up, I would like to congratulate all the new members of this Parliament. I am sure, like many of you, our families, our parents, our grandparents, and our ancestors are very proud of this bold new step that we have all taken. I also wish to remind honorable members that we represent the future of governance and politics in Trinidad and Tobago. We have a duty to change the way we conduct the business of Parliament. We have a responsibility to the 400,000 young persons to set the right example and lead this nation with pride, dignity, and integrity. I am sure the fact that this 11th Parliament consists of the most number of young persons in both the lower and upper houses, the viewership and the listenership of the Parliament channel will rival any prime-time cable TV channel in Trinidad and Tobago. In my household alone, I have added 3 young adults who would pass the Parliament channel straight. They are now glued onto it because I am here. We must never disappoint our audience, Madam Speaker, with a display unbecoming of the noble citizens that I know we are all in this House. On the other hand, Madam Speaker, I would like to make a plea to the seasoned MPs on both sides of this honorable House to set the right tone and atmosphere as we conduct the nation's business. Someone said on Friday or Saturday, I think it was banter across the floor, Madam Speaker, that the first time MPs were children. Well, as the saying goes, I think perhaps it was the member for St. Augustine, but as the saying goes, children learn what they live. Treat us the young MPs as your children in this house. Lead by example. And together as one nation under God, we will be unstoppable, Madam Speaker. When we leave this house, Madam Speaker, we must leave as parliamentarians, not like a Juve band with mud plastered all over us. Madam Speaker, thank you for this opportunity, and you have my commitment of the highest professional standards as I perform the work as a legislator for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call upon the member for Tunapuna.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to make my maiden contribution in this 2016 budget debate. Madam Speaker, as I stand in this honorable house, I give thanks to the Almighty God for life and for being of service to my country, Trinidad and Tobago. I take the opportunity to congratulate you, Madam Speaker, on your election to the position of Speaker of this Honorable House of Representatives. You are assured of my unequivocal support as the Deputy Speaker of this House. Madam Speaker, I congratulate the Minister of Finance in his presentation of this, the 2016 Appropriation Bill. When the going gets tough, the tough gets going. Madam Speaker, I must also congratulate the Prime Minister for the confidence and faith in Esmond Forde and the constituents to deliver the tipping point, marginal, record-breaking, voter turnout, and history-making votes received seat, 11,228 of Tunapuna into government, and his overall team selection. Maybe the West Indies Cricket Board should have sought his counsel. To my 26,000 plus Tunapuna constituents, whom I have a full commitment to represent for the next 5 years. Not forgetting my friends, family, wife, and 2 beautiful daughters. I extend recognition and courtesies to the office of the Opposition Leader, Member of Parliament for Paray and her opposition team. Madam Speaker, the constituency of Tunapuna boundary spans from Vista Heights or Tavernet Street in Tacarigua in the northwest, south to the northern side of the Eastern Main Road into Tunapuna, and west to Riverside Road, Crip. It further extends northward and eastward from First Bridge along the eastern side of the Maracas Royal Road and to the eastern side of O'Connor Road in Maracas in the northwest. This constituency, as the municipal region, derives its name from the town of Tunapuna. The constituency is a study of diversity, town and country, urban and rural, rich and poor, traffic gridlock, yes, traffic gridlock, so therefore we welcome the rapid rail, and leisure driving. And I dare say, mass transit, has the highest, and I dare say, Madam Speaker, has the highest intellectual capita in Trinidad and Tobago. A large segment of these being retired or underemployed persons with vast institutional skills and memory, with no mechanism available for the transfer of their knowledge and mentoring of our young people in the society. Madam Speaker, Tunapuna, in the language of the indigenous peoples of Trinidad and Tobago, means upon water. Tuna meaning water, and Puna meaning upon. Madam Speaker, we all know that water is the framework for many things. We being upon it not only intend to walk but also to ensure Tunapuna gives an improved life for the residents and transient communities, and by extension, the entire Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, when the Honorable Minister of Finance presented our government budget on Monday, October 6, 2015, in the tradition of one of Tunapuna illustrious sons, we look beyond the boundary to grasp, conceptualize, and harmonize the resources of Tunapuna with the reality of Trinidad and Tobago post-People's Partnership. This is to ensure that Tunapuna's contribution will engender a product similar to Miss Atwell's Ivory and Steel. Madam Speaker, Winifred Atwell was a concert pianist who built her tour recital around the accompaniment by the Pan Am North Star Steel Orchestra at a time when Pan was looked down in Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, the Honorable Minister of Finance, in laying out the budget for the 2016 fiscal year, placed particular emphasis on critical areas: tourism, private-public partnership, food production, sports and youth affairs, community development, and local government reform, where, like the score sheet for the music festival being placed before Exodus Steel Orchestra or Birdsong Music Academy for arrangement and performance par excellence. Madam Speaker, it is not by chance that these organizations were used as illustrations. Exodus is the offspring of a famous traditional St. John Road community band, Flamingos, that fell on hard times. Had a slight shift in location to Ortonville, retooled under new community, produced, exposed, and experienced management. Whereas Birdsong is a product of the University of the West Indies and the nearby Tunapuna community. A collaboration which was given relocation notice by the university and they fired into new heights by innovativeness and with some of the developmental training received from the same university. Madam Speaker, the human resource is the greatest asset of any country, and the youths are our future. Madam Speaker, over the past 60 months of the PP administration, there have been little movement in the area of community development in the constituency of Tunapuna. Construction that were in progress in 2010 were halted. For example, the El Dorado Tunapuna Community Center, which still has not yet been completed in 6 years from 2009 to 2015. The Tunapuna Girl Guides Hut and Recreational Facility, where construction was stopped in July 2010 after a contract was awarded, approved, and issued in 2009. Save and accept for the courts, and where tremendous human efforts were employed in the attempted effort to remove a heritage community recreation, Orange Grove Estate, or the Eddie Hart grounds as we know it, remains for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. That's the power of the people working for you. Personal and collective responsibility. Personal and collective responsibility is a theme continually stressed by our new Honorable Prime Minister, Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley. When the Minister of Finance again made a clarion call for diversification of the economy, it was not by chance that I dared to make the statement that our constituency boundaries contain the highest intellectual capital. Madam Speaker, Tunapuna possesses the intellectual capital, the structural facilities, the human resource, and the required public-private capital and partnership potential to become the invisible export capital of Trinidad and Tobago. Tunapuna has one of the oldest industrial parks in the country, the Mokoya Twin City Industrial Estate, 10 minutes from Piaco International Airport. accessible to both ports in Port of Spain and Point Lisas. This budget speaks to refurbishment and expansion of this developmental area. We had a history of making golden crystal sugar at the Orange Grove estate when others were making simply grey and brown sugar with the same inputs. We had and still have a mercantile-based enterprise economy. Nevertheless, Madam Speaker, we also have been fortunate to have a history of collaboration and partnering among our intellects, business, and labor. As your Tunapuna representative in this August House and former local government representative for 5 productive years of the Tunapuna district, I will seek to forge new and renewed links and linkages, networks and relationships among all our Tunapuna stakeholders and influence them to achieve the budget goal of diversification. Diversification through innovation, renewed collaboration, partnership, productivity, and overall efficacy in the employment and engagement of all available resources. Madam Speaker, during the 5 years of my public life, I have always had 2 teams, Get on Board with Forde and Esmond Serzol. Madam Speaker, we have grown accustomed to making bread. However, though we would still engage in bread making, the time calls for expanding the number of our formulae in use to ensure that cakes of different flavors and textures, bakes, pastries, and biscuits are now among the products produced. Madam Speaker, the 2016 budget represents for the people of Tunapuna not a pie in the sky, but more rain to allow us all more water to plant good seeds and harvest bountifully for ourselves and Trinidad and Tobago. Tunapuna is ready to contribute to the agricultural food basket of our country. We will re-energize the crop farmers of the Cora Valley, explore new agricultural land and farming possibilities in the Maracas Valley and the St. Michael Village communities. Land acquisition options for housing, accommodation opportunities will also be on the agenda. The budget speaks to the area of tourism, Madam Speaker. Though many of us associate the tourism with sun, sea, and party, Madam Speaker, Tunapuna has so many attributes in its favor where this sector is concerned. The incentives outlined in the budget, together with its flora, fauna, its riverine valleys, and existing local knowledge of the areas, particularly Cora, Mount St. Benedict, and the Maracas Valley. They offers opportunities for the development of the sector related to the micro, small, and medium enterprises. Avenues such as tour guiding and trail guiding, bird watching, food and breakfast retreat facilities, outback experiences, rainforests, waterfall, and river experiences. Madam Speaker, in terms of our rivers and watersheds, this approach could save us the ridiculous spectacle of a river basin and watershed-based community generating water but not having access to it. Through skewed public organization and operational policy. I must say, Madam Speaker, in the phrase water for all, but in Maracas and St. Joseph, they could not have benefited to that clause. Madam Speaker, we have both the resident and transient demographics to develop and sustain such niche markets. We see our young and the not so young and families acquiring the necessary skills and knowledge by way of community involvement and planned educational and vocational training programs geared towards this. Only last week, my 2 Laventille colleagues, parliamentary colleagues, hosted a workshop catering to this with UTT, MIC, NESE, etc., offering workshops to benefit the youth in the community. Madam Speaker, Professor Sankat, yes, he's a Tunapuna constituent, the current principal of UWI St. Augustine, recently stated that the institution represents a market of some 18,000 students. It must also be noted that the municipal region of Tunapuna Piako is the most populated and largest municipality region in the nation. Madam Speaker, my previous expressions are not the mighty bombers or spoilers' dreams, but are specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, realistic, and realizable. Madam Speaker, these could and must be achieved within the short to medium term framework. There is no reason to doubt. Already, one of the tertiary institutions in the area has operated in this manner. I speak of the Caribbean Union College, a campus of the St. Andrews University in Maracas, which apart from the institution's academic and theological study facilities, possess a miniature industrial park. This exposes some of their students to hands-on business and manufacturing exposure. This serves not only for the purpose of student economic sustainability during study, it also develops the business and entrepreneurial skills of the students, thereby preparing them on their return home or relocation after study to engage or insist in promoting entrepreneurial or business activities. Madam Speaker, the budget speaks to the People's National Movement Administration policy prescriptions as outlined in the 2015 manifesto and adopted by the Cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago as its policy. Local government reform is a main pillar of this policy, along with the accompanying property tax resumption, which would facilitate and enhance the cash flow position of the regional corporations, boroughs, and cities. The anticipated improved quality and quantity of the human resources to be allocated to these organizations will enhance productivity and service delivery to our constituents, and burgesses in a timely, efficient, and effective manner. I say this from a position of fact as a past local government practitioner at the highest level. Madam Speaker, there is no reason the constituency of Tunapuna cannot attain comparable scale status of the Boston Triangle or Atlanta area as an area of academia, innovation, cutting-edge business, and conventions. Good, sustainable, environmentally friendly recreation, a workforce that availing itself to high quality and paying employment for high-skilled and entrepreneurial work. The campus environment with comparable high technology and service and consultancy companies. The timing is ripe, Madam Speaker, for the University City, Tunapuna, St. Augustine, St. Joseph, to move from embryo stage to fetus and then delivery within this term of good governance anticipated by the People's National Movement. Madam Speaker, the people of Tunapuna are on board with the 2016 budget as presented by the Finance Minister. Madam Speaker, once again, I must congratulate the Minister of Finance on his 2016 budget. This budget, which definitely will instill and restore national confidence, pride, integrity, accountability, economic stability, and rebuild the trust of the people in government, while developing a willingness so that we will all do the work together. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
I call on the next member. May I ask that if the debate is at an end? Honorable members, it is now 11:58. I propose that the House be suspended for the lunch break. This House is now suspended. and shall resume in an hour's time.
As indicated. As indicated.